Welcome, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Everyone hear me in back? Okay. So my name is Leslie Fox. I'm the manager at North Valley Library. And I want to thank you for coming today. Thank you for expressing such interest in Rudolfo Anaya, the author and the library. I want to thank the Friends of the Library and the Library Foundation for making this possible and helping us out with all kinds of programming. So I also want to thank Los Ranchos Historical Society, Theresa, Rael, and Gordene MacKenzie. I approached them about doing something like a talk for Rudolfo Anaya and about Rudolfo Anaya, and it turned into this big, wonderful thing. And so today we have them to thank, and also author Irene Blea is here, who'll talk a little bit about her book, Talks with Rudy. And then we will have a speaker just for 10 minutes or so. He's coming in a little bit, Mike Dubois, who was Rudy's accountant. So that should be interesting, and friend. So we've got a lot of things going on. As you can see, I started a little board where we're trying to collect stories about Rudolfo Anaya. So if you've had any interaction with him, if you took a class with him, if you, let's see, I heard him speak once, but I know we've all been touched by his writing. So if you want to write about that, it would be great. It can be just one Post-it note or fill out 3 or 4. And we want to make that part of our collection also. So I've been the manager here about 2 years. People would come in and ask if we had a display about Rudolfo Anaya, and sadly we didn't. We had like a couple little flyers, and we would usually be out of Rudolfo Anaya books because they're so popular. And our library system floats books to other branches if somebody requests it from another branch. So we never had any Rudolfo Anaya books in the Rudolfo Anaya North Valley Library. And I thought, this is wrong, so I need to do something about it. Because of our funding, we have to float all our books, but there are some special loopholes. If we get restricted funds through, say, the Foundation for the Library, I can spend that money just on books for us. And that means that we will have a bigger collection when people come in. They're sure to find something by Rudolfo Anaya. So I started collecting those books. I had patrons and friends of the library, my friends, Gordene. I mean, a lot of people have donated some books. It's still kind of small, but it's growing, and we want to continue to grow that collection. So if you would like to donate new or used books by Rudolfo Anaya to this library, we would love that. Or you can also donate to the foundation. We have envelopes back there, and they will make sure that money is spent on Rudolfo Anaya materials or for the display. So I set up a little display in a glass case. We have the books and the display are just, if you go straight across the back of the library to the middle by the big glass windows, you'll see it. I hope you'll check that out before you leave. What else? I just want to hit on a couple of things. After our speakers, we'll have some question and answer time, and then we're going to have some cake, and you can visit and eat cake in here. Let's see. Okay, so this library was opened in 1994. Then we had a little fire. I don't know if you know about that. It had to shut down. That was 11 years ago, and it reopened May 2nd in 2014. And then in 2018, the Bernalillo County decided to change the name to Rudolfo Anaya. So we had a ceremony for that. Rudolfo Anaya showed up for it, and he got to speak. It happened on the 15th of March, which is why we're doing this today. And so it's been 7 years. It's not a 10-year anniversary yet, but I'm jumping the gun a little bit. But I just wanted to do it and let everyone know about our collection that we're growing. So I have a video I'm going to show. We may have to work on the sound a little bit, but I think you'll probably hear it. It's 7 minutes, and it's of the renaming ceremony that we had 7 years ago.
Excitement, the Rudolfo, Anaya, North Valley Library.
I've personally enjoyed the writings, and so have my children, of Rudolfo and Anaya for many years, and today's an event that's very important to me personally. And as was mentioned some time ago, I think it was back in September, I received a letter from former County Manager Wanda Hill regarding the idea of changing the name. Of course, I offered my support. And we moved the item through the renaming process. And my colleagues on the board, the commissioners, I want to thank them. They joined me in supporting the renaming proposal. It was a unanimous vote.
Yeah, I know last night I was thinking, why is the reason that we want to name a library after Rudolfo Anaya? And I started thinking about stories that he had told me. He said that growing up as a young man in the rural parts of New Mexico, he had great contact with nature, la naturaleza. But a teacher opened up a small vending book library in his hometown. And it gave him that opportunity to explore new worlds, to explore beyond la naturaleza. These books that he borrowed from the library provided him with escapism, something that you all need, that we all need, in searching for new and profound worlds. However, these books, in his readings, he couldn't see himself there. So with his writing, in his novels, and his children's books, he has provided us with characters and stories that reflect the values of us as heroes, as heroines, as individuals, who we can identify with.
The libraries were important to me. At Albuquerque High, we used to have I don't know what they call the timeout or rest period, or you spend an hour at the library and you're supposed to do your homework. All the guys from Martinez Town and Varelas and Arruca, they found out that I could write. So they would come to me and say, "Hey, Rudy, why don't you write me a note for that girl over there?" I really like her. So I would write the note and he'd pass it on, and pretty soon the girl was looking at me. She knew written the note.
Rudolfo and I are just a tremendous role model. As you said, I've been involved with the Cultural Center for many, many years, and that's what the Cultural Center is all about. It's about preserving and sharing this wonderful, beautiful culture called Hispanic culture. No one does it better than Rudolfo.
The North Valley Library opened with Master of Ceremonies Juan Vigil on May 14th, 1994. It was the opening day agenda. Today, we're here to name this library after one of our most outstanding New Mexico authors. This is a tradition with the libraries seen in 3 of our other buildings, where we honor authors who have made major contributions to the literary canon of New Mexico. Hence, we have the Ernie Pyle Library, the Erna Ferguson Library, and the Tony Hillerman Library. I'm thrilled that the Bernalillo County Commissioners have chosen to honor Rudolfo Anaya in this way on this building, and I'm humbled that this library will share his name.
7 West Wing and those furnitures and vigas, and a sense that I belong there. And that wasn't very easy for a lot of Chicanitos in those days. That feeling of belonging is very important.
I have to say, I thought a lot about Rudolfo Anaya and his literature, and it's through his artistry and genius, he took his story, our New Mexico history, and told our story. And so brilliantly, because you started in West Ultima with the rural New Mexico life and the migration to the city, Harbat, and he speaks for all of us in so many ways, the Chicano experience, the New Mexico experience. And it's something that we share generation to generation with great pride.
The naming of this library, I think he's received a lot of honor, but I think he was is a great honor, not just for the Rudolfo Anaya, who has received as many honors as anybody, but for Leo County and our Theresa.
He has stated in one of his interviews that our kids need something closer to them, la cultura, the New Mexico setting, owl in a straw hat. That's going to be protected. Libraries are important to Rudolfo. These are places for children, adolescents, ancianos, people old like me, can explore new ideas, be exposed to new people, new cultures, and even find romance, as he can attest to.
I used to go back to summer classes, and this is after I graduated. And one summer I was taking a class with this beautiful woman. Her name is Theresa. So we would, I think she captured me. I think it was the other way around. It was mutual, and after class, we were studying folklore, and she said, "Could you tell me some of those old stories?" I said, "Sure, let's go to the library." Instead of to Jack's.
Gracias for sharing with us the wonderful experiences of your novels, for giving the chamacos staples they can read and ponder the issues of good and evil, the right and wrong, and see that they are valued. We look forward to your new book and find out how Chupacabra outlived Rudy the Kid.
Liberty Mutual is all she talks about, so
Sorry about the ad.
Thank you all for coming today. The panel that we're doing is called "In the End, We Are All Just Stories: The Magic of New Mexican Writer Rudolfo Anaya." I want to thank Leslie Fox and the Rudolfo Anaya Library for kindly initiating and hosting this event. I also want to thank Cindy Sylvester, Sylvia Spence, Laurie Dubois for sharing your thoughts and images of Rudy. Our panel includes Theresa Rael, the first president of our Los Ranchos Historical Society, Mike Dubois, who will be joining us in a little bit, was Rudy's accountant and friend and knew him very well. And I'm thrilled that we have Irene Blea. She is the author of the just released book, Talking to Rudy, that incorporates magical realism, and I couldn't put it down. I read it in 2 days, and if you like Rudy's writing, you'll love Irene's writing. I'm Gordene MacKenzie, the current president of the Los Ranchos Historical Society. Thank you all.
My name is Theresa Rael, and I really want to thank everybody for coming. It's a great turnout. And again, I'd like to thank Leslie Fox for inviting us. And I hope that you enjoyed the presentation as much as we enjoyed remembering Rudolfo Anaya and researching him. I'm going to do like a short chronology of him, and then I did have him as an English teacher in high school for a short time, and I'll talk about that. And I'm not a public speaker, so bear with me. Rudolfo Anaya was one of the leading Chicano writers. Tony Hillerman referred to Rudy as the godfather and guru of Chicano literature. Bless Me Ultima was his groundbreaking novel in 1972. Rudy was born in 1937, and he passed away in 2020 at the age of 82. He was born in a small rural village, Pastura, New Mexico. Pastura is located in the southeastern plains, referred by Rudy as the Llano, and it lies between Santa Rosa and Vaughn. His family moved to Santa Rosa when Rudy was a small toddler. He was raised in Santa Rosa. His father was a vaquero and came from a family of cattle workers and sheep herders. His mother's family were farmers from Puerto de Luna in the Pecos Valley. He grew up with 3 brothers and 4 sisters. He was around family and friends who were always telling stories. Their stories created an image in Rudy's mind. Years later, Rudy wrote to create an image in the reader's mind. He always felt the beauty of the desert flatlands of New Mexico, referenced as the Llano, in his writings. Growing up in Santa Rosa had a profound influence on his early childhood. He felt fortunate to look around where he grew up and have a feeling that the hills, the mountains, the river, this earth and sky were his. What was the first sign that Rudy should be a writer? I'll read a short paragraph from the book, Rudolfo Anaya, The Essays. You were just beginning to crawl, my mother said many years. I sat you on a sheepskin on the floor. My family was there, and each of us placed different objects around you. Your father set down his saddle because he wanted you to be a vaquero. I don't remember who put down a pencil and paper. Perhaps was me, because I had always yearned for an education. I had a bright mind, but in those days, girls remained at home. Only my brothers went to school. Anyway, you crawled to the pencil and paper. Rudy was raised in a Spanish-speaking culture. He fell in love with books when his mother read the first book to him, which was a catechism book written in Spanish, and she read it to him in Spanish. Rudy learned to speak English only when he went to first grade. At 6 years old, he found the transition from Spanish to English quite difficult. However, his teachers reported to his mother how well Rudy was doing in school. He loved reading and learning. Santa Rosa had a small room on top of the fire station that was their library, and Rudy had to climb a rickety ladder to get there. One teacher volunteered to open the library on Saturday mornings, and he loved going to the library. Out of all his little gang of friends, he was the only one that went to the library. He once said, I didn't know the magic of words until I started to read. He felt books were his salvation. In 1952, Rudy and his family moved to Albuquerque after World War II when he was in the 8th grade. The move was part of the post-war migration boom, where people were going to bigger cities where there was more opportunity for work. They settled in the barrio of Burales. Coming from a very small rural town into a big city, he felt thrown into a completely different lifestyle. When he was 16, he fractured 2 neck vertebrae after diving into the irrigation ditch. This was a traumatic experience that left him temporarily paralyzed and in a body cast for a whole summer. But it later served as an inspiration for his autobiographical novel, Tortuga. He tried to describe the pain and suffering he endured as well as the other kids at Carrie Tingley Hospital in Truth and Consequences, New Mexico. He had to learn to walk and feed himself all over again. People didn't have swimming pools back then in Albuquerque. Around 1934, the first swimming pool here was at what currently is Los Poblanos Historic Inn and Organic Garden or Farm. Kids back then, including myself, used to swim and play in the ditches all the time. He graduated from high school in 1956. In the 1960s, he felt unprepared to be a Mexican-American student at UNM. He found it to be difficult and a sad experience because there were so few Mexican-American students. Rudy was very spiritual. He asked for guidance from his ancestors to guide him at the university. He found solace in the Zimmerman Library, as he just said. He was an avid reader, but found the books at the university did not reflect his culture. His Chicano studies was not taught at that time. He started writing as an undergraduate at UNM. He first started writing poetry, and he thought this was a way to meet girls. He wrote daily. He fell in love with literature. The more he found he had stories to tell, this is how he decided to become a writer. You've heard the phrase, reading takes you places. Well, Rudy truly believed that. So if you think about whenever you read a book or poetry, you know where your mind goes. He found if he wrote about family and friends, people loved it. In 1963, he earned a Bachelor's of Art in English from UNM. He met Patricia Lawless in graduate school and married her in 1966. In 1968, he earned a Master's of Art in English from UNM, and in 1972, he earned a Master's of Art in Guidance and Counseling from UNM. Bless Me Ultima was his groundbreaking novel in 1972. He started writing Bless Me Ultima in 1963, and he had to rewrite that book numerous times. He made a statement in the book, Conversations with Rudolfo Anaya. It took me a long time. It took me 6 or 7 years because I didn't know how to write. I had to learn all of the crafts and technique of writing. Anaya faced tremendous difficulty getting his work published because of its unique combination of English and Spanish language, and then the Chicano-centric content that it contained. After several years of circulating Bless Me Ultima in the East Coast, Punto Sol, a small independent press in Berkeley, California, had been publishing Chicano literature. They published it, and it was a success. The book's release coincided with the growing and militant Chicano movement that stressed cultural pride over assimilation. It came as Mexican-American college students were demanding more literature by Latino authors. It was a full 22 years later before Warner Books distributed a mass market edition of Bless Me Ultima. To write, Anaya used material of his culture, the language, folklore, native mythology, history, and all the other characteristics that we label culture. His writing was autobiographical. He was never really concerned about it being true to reality. Writing Bless Me Ultima, he wanted the reader to know and understand New Mexico. And he really wanted to write about his culture. People, family, and friends from Santa Rosa are all characters in Bless Me Ultima. He captures the soul of these people. Again, he wrote to create an image in the reader's mind. He felt blessed at being able to work at what he loved best, writing. Initially, he didn't like research. He felt research was harmful to the writer. He once said, in research, you wind up telling somebody else's idea. However, years later, he did do a lot of research for his writing, as Gordene will delve into. He initially resisted to write politically. Chicano writers were advocating for Chicano writers to write a political message, and he didn't agree with that. However, 3 or 4 years later, he said, writers have an obligation to be political in order to take a strong stance against hate, prejudice, and bigotry. In 2016, he was awarded the National Humanities Medal by former President Barack Obama. In 2016, he said to the New York Times, I'm thoroughly New Mexican. I grew up there. I know the landscape, the people, the small communities. I've said before that, in order to understand me, you have to understand me in the context of New Mexico. He always lived in New Mexico. He traveled many places, but he never had a desire to leave. When Rudy was asked about his roots, he would look down at his feet and see the roots of his soul grasping the earth. In high school in 1971, I had Rudy Anaya as an English teacher for a short time until Valley High School hired a full-time English teacher. And he was very much into the Chicano movement at that time. And Chicano was not a familiar word to me, and it was just starting to come out and be used. My parents didn't want to be referred to as Chicanos. They didn't like the demonstrations and protests that were taking place here in California and in other parts of the Southwest. We had the Chicano movement demonstrating on Central Avenue at UNM campus. We had Viva la Raza. Reyes Lopez Tejerina was demonstrating in northern New Mexico for the land grants for the people. And the National Guard was called out. So my parents felt these were radical Mexican Americans and they didn't want any association. And I was very much influenced by my parents. I think Rudy knew I was frustrated in class, and he did ask me to speak to him after class one day. And I just said to him, I can't relate to what you're talking about. But you have to remember, I'm 16 years old. You know, I didn't have the experience in life or the hardship that Rudy had. And I didn't realize, or I didn't relate actually to the oppression Rudy felt as a Chicano in the white man's world. And, you know, I think I grew up isolated in Los Ranchos. We were only one of 2 Hispanic families in our neighborhood. My father was an engineer, and pretty much all the neighbors worked at Sandia Labs. Where Rudy grew up in Santa Rosa, Barelas, his father worked as a vaquero, a cattle worker, a sheep herder, and later for the railroad here. My point is, we just grew up differently. And understanding comes with life for most of us. I don't think the same way I did when I was 16 as you probably don't either. And he was actually very nice to me, he was kind, and he said to me, maybe one day you will experience what I am talking about. And I was a nurse for 43 and a half years, and I think that was a real eye-opener for me. It really made me see the different walks of life that people come from. And I recall a doctor speaking with a Spanish-speaking patient that spoke very broken English. And when he walked away, he said to me, people are so stupid here. They can't even speak English. And I glared at him and I said, really? Just because people don't speak English doesn't mean they're stupid. Rudy felt the need to go out and tell kids in high school and grade school, you can write. You can write about what you know. He felt Chicano children were at a disadvantage because they were told they didn't have command of the English language. In 2019, Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham signed permanently designating October 30th in New Mexico as Rudolfo Anaya I Love to Read Day. Rudy said, reading is the most important skill a child will ever learn. Rudy had many quotes, and my favorite quote is, "In the end, we are all just stories." And that is my story of Rudolfo Anaya.
Leslie, could you pull up 01? Okay. And then from that, we'll go 0. We're here today because we care about our history and our culture. We're here because we know the past is a vital guide to our future. And we're here because Rudolfo Anaya, who brought beauty and art into our world, deserves remembering. New Mexico's award-winning writer, Rudolfo Anaya, who I was privileged to know as Rudy, grew up in the 40s, a period of pachucos, zoot suits, and low-riding cars, which he enjoyed riding in the 1950s and cruising. In the 50s, he said he really wanted to be one of the beats. A journalist coined the term beatnik, but he knew the beats were the ones that wrote and created art. In the 60s, he was influenced by the burgeoning and growing Chicano movement, also by the peace movement of the counterculture. Rudy, in the 70s, ushered in the Chicano literature movement and witnessed the second wave of feminism, the Brown Berets, the Black Power movement, the American Indian movement, and the early LGBT movement. Among the prolific writings of Rudy Anaya is a fictional account of a village he calls Los Ranchitos, which closely resembles Los Ranchos. Anaya, the author of Bless Me Ultima, was regarded as the founder and the person who revolutionized Chicano literature. He described, as Theresa pointed out, being an uncomfortable student at UNM in the early 50s and 60s. And like she said, he saw few people that were like him. And he did not see his history or culture represented in the literature that he loved. Rudy was determined to write a different kind of literature in which his mestizo, Mexican, Spanish, and indigenous culture was included. Rudy stayed up late at night, pounding the keys of his brother's old Smith Corona typewriter, teaching himself how to write. He wanted to write stories that spoke to the Chicano experience. And as he learned, he burned his first 3 novels. One was 1,000 pages. During the day, Rudy taught in the public schools. Every night, without fail, he wrote. In the 1960s, as he struggled writing a novel drawn from his childhood, growing up in Santa Rosa, he had a vision. Ultima, an old woman dressed in black, appeared. She told him his novel would only work if he included her as a character. She was the first of many characters and guides to visit him. When he included her, in his novel, the story changed. It was no longer a surface novel. It centered on the relationship between young Antonio and the curandera ultima. Writing it taught Rudy how to go deeper and how to dive into the myths of the subconscious and collective consciousness that unites us all. Patricia Lawless, Rudy's wife, an English and drama teacher that he met in a summer folklore class, read all 7 drafts of Bless Me Ultima and shared her suggestions. Each reworking of the novel took a year, and he says it wasn't easy. Pat encouraged his writing and became his most trusted editor. When Rudy submitted Bless Me Ultima to the major publishing houses, he said he received enough rejections to paper his walls. They saw the book as too regional, being set in New Mexico, as Theresa said, and they didn't understand his use of code switching from English to Spanish in the novel. 2 years later, Rudy saw an ad in a publication of Quinta de Sol in Berkeley that solicited Chicano stories. He sent his manuscript to them. The press not only published it in 1972, they also awarded it the best Chicano novel of the year. And as Theresa said, in 2016, President Obama presented him with the National Humanities Medal. It was for celebrating the Chicano experience and revealing universal truths about the human condition. And Rudy at the time raised his hand and said, "Viva Obama!" And then he said, "This is for Santa Rosa," because he always felt a great link to Santa Rosa, which took him back to the wonder and the creativity of being a child. Bless Me Ultima was later made into a film, a play, and an opera. It is written in the first person because I identify with Antonio, Rudy said, combining historical fiction with magical realism. The story is set in the rural plains of New Mexico. Do we have that clip of the Llano in Postura? Where he was born, I think it's 07, and grew up in the late 1930s through the late 1940s. His main character, Antonio, grows up poor amid a rich Mexican, Spanish, and indigenous culture. Antonio's life changes when Ultima, the curandera, moves in with his family to remove a curse placed on his uncle by a witch. He wrote, "She took my hand and I felt the power of a whirlwind sweep around me. I saw for the first time the wild beauty of our hills and the magic of the Green River. My soul grew under her careful guidance." Young Antonio begins to question some of the dogma he grew up with. After he made his first communion, he believed that God would start talking to him. So he wanted to ask God all the kinds of questions like, why are we here? And what happens after we die? But God didn't speak to him. When that happened, his faith was shaken. He wrote, "All Nuevo Mexicans are storytellers. The song of the river and the hills and the hum of the earth permeate my novels." In the early 1980s, Bless Me Ultima was censored in California, Colorado, and other states, including Bloomfield, New Mexico, where the school board burned copies of his books. Rudy said burning of a book is a highly symbolic act next to the horror of burning a human being. To burn a book is to intimidate the process of creativity and erase the history of one people. He was encouraged that people stood up and expressed indignation about the book burnings. He said, books enlarge our experience, acquainting us with the thoughts of others. You cannot burn the books of one group and expect democracy to work. In 2012, reacting to a fear of immigrants from Mexico, Arizona burned his book and then dismantled the Mexican-American program at a local college. Today, as Rudy predicted, fear is motivating more censorship of books and censoring what can be taught. Because of the huge success of his first novel and being at the very forefront of the Chicano literary movement, Rudy was invited to teach at UNM in 1974. I met him when I was an undergraduate student in the first Chicano literature course that he taught, a class that reinforced my commitment to fight against oppression. Years later, Rudy encouraged me to find my roots in a graduate fiction writing class that I didn't get credit for, but it was something I needed for my soul. Rudy could be a trickster. Knowing I was born and raised in New Mexico, he'd look at me, smile, roll his eyes, and he'd say, Gordene, Chile Verde. Or sometimes he'd switch it and do the same gestures and go, Gordene, Chile Rojo. He was very kind with students. He gave many of us $100 in the early 1970s to teach poetry in the schools, which was a lot of money back then. And he started the Rio Grande Writers Association. Bless Me Ultima was followed by 2 more semi-autobiographical books, completing a trilogy. Heart of Aztlan was published in 1976. It was set in the barrio of Barelas, where Rudy lived with his family in the 1950s. The novel is about Chicano empowerment. The father of the family, who thinks his family is disintegrating, Clemente, aided by 2 very unique guides, a blind guitar player and another guide, has a spiritual and political awakening which leads him to stop drinking and organize railroad workers to fight against oppression. Tortuga, published in 1979, and Theresa shared information about that, draws on Rudy's experience of being paralyzed, as Theresa said, after diving into an irrigation ditch where he fractured his neck. He says he floated face down in the water, unable to move. I lived through the near-death experience, and I saw my soul rising in the air. The novel is about the struggle to deal with trauma and pain. Like his character, Rudy spent months in a hospital in the southern part of New Mexico, in the middle of the desert, where there is a mountain shaped like a giant turtle. The young patients referred to him as Tortuga. He turned inward and says that he began to enjoy reading as never before. Solomon, a young patient unable to move, becomes his telepathic guide, encouraging him. A nurse's aide, close to his age, falls in love with him and helps heal him with her hands and herbs. In 1995 to 2005, Rudy wrote a quartet of murder mysteries arranged by the seasons and centered around the character of Sonny Baca, who he called an extension of Antonio from Bless Me Ultima. The novels Zia Summer, Rio Grande Fall, Shaman Winter, and Jemez Spring are all set in the fictional semi-rural village of Los Ranchitos that mirrors Los Ranchos with irrigation ditches, cottonwood trees, adobe houses, and the remains of ancient pueblos, and some of which he said were found beneath the swimming pool. For all of us that live in Los Ranchos, we know that's where the first archaeological dig was. Sonny solves crimes and suffers at the hands of evil people seeking power, world domination, and complete destruction of nature. With the help of Don Alicio, a neighbor in his 1980s who practices an earth-based religion, and Lorenza, a gifted curandera, Sonny connects to his ancestral mestizo ancestors. He learns how to navigate in his dreams and also to summon his magical power, which is about coyotes. And coyotes were a special animal to Rudy because when he was young and he'd go fishing, there was a mother coyote that would bring out her cubs when he was there. And she didn't do it all the time. And so that became an important symbol for him. So then Sonny learns to fight evil and learns the way of a shaman. A visionary storyteller, Rudy wrote over 44 books, including novels, short stories, poetry, children's books, plays, and numerous essays and articles. His fictional books include historical accounts of the Pueblos in Spanish contact, Los Alamos and the Bomb, struggles against overdevelopment, and social economic struggles to better the lives of Mexican Americans. All of his novels include characters who are healers and or spiritual guides. Rudy wanted to write in every genre, but challenge the boundaries of those genres. If you read his detective quartet, it's nothing like any other detective story I've ever read. His creativity and brilliant imagination, skill as a writer and an activist who wanted to change the world, led to boundary-breaking books that envision a more diverse and democratic world where multiple voices are heard. He supported and opened the door for women and multiple ethnicities and members of LGBT to be heard and published, and he fought to have more diversity. Grieving after the death of his wife, Patricia, in 2010, he wrote The Old Man's Love Story, published in 2013. In 2016, he found a forgotten manuscript, Chupacabra and Billy the Kid. He says actually the book found him. He rewrote it, noting the craft of writing is always hard, but you always learn something in the process. The protagonist in the story is Rosa, a Los Angeles Chicana social worker. She takes off a summer to go to her ancestral home in Puerto de Luna, which by the way is where Rudy's parents were born, to work on her novel about Billy the Kid. She emails with a friend who has been picked up by benevolent extraterrestrials, worried about the fate of humans and the earth, which at the time is ruled by an authoritarian government who is working with scientists to genetically create an army of chupacabra clones that they hope will rule the world. As Rosa is writing, Billy the Kid suddenly appears. And he tells her, if you want to write the truth about me, time travel with me back to 1879. She enters a porthole and ends up riding with Billy, who is belovedly called Belito, and his gang. She learns that he is loved by the Mexicans. Not only does he speak Spanish, but he leads the fight against some greedy Anglo-Americans who are stealing their land grants. Rosa's sad because she knows he will die, and Belito is shot before he can draw a weapon. Rosa wants to turn home and learns that the Pecos River, beloved to Rudy, is a portal. She completes her novel revealing the truth about Billy the Kid. Other marvelous books are Rudolfo, Anaya, the essays, which explores his politics, Halamanta, that explores his philosophy, and the children's book, No More Bullies. Last fall, let's see where that is, Blowing Grasses on the Llano 07. Did we show that? Okay, 08, the house, he writes about that. He writes about the wind blowing through the grasses of the Llano in many of his books. And then if we could move to 08, it's the house Rudy lived in. It's boarded up at the time. So last fall, writer Cindy Sylvester and I traveled to Postura and Santa Rosa to see the blowing grasses on the Llano where Rudy was born. While eating our lunch, we saw a coyote drink from a pond. In Santa Rosa, where he was raised and felt a deep connection, we visited the Moisey Library. Could we see the Anaya road sign 09 that's still in Postura? And there are only 2 street signs in Postura. And that's like a typewriter that Rudy typed on for 36 years, and he gave his desk, which was a little tiny wooden desk, to the library, because of course he grew up in Santa Rosa, and he said he hoped it would inspire children and other people to write. In addition, we also viewed letters he'd written, his book collection, some of his awards, and his beloved tennis shoes. After, we stop at the landscape park and were awed by the work of master sculptor Reynaldo Sonny Rivera, who created a beautiful bronze bas relief, life-size, of Rudy. And all around a pond, there are plaques with quotes from Rudy's novels. There's also a bas relief in the shape of a map of New Mexico. Let's see. Is that 12 possibly? Maybe. And those are all scenes from Bless Me Ultima. His father, who's a vaquero, his mother, who is a farmer, car that's packed maybe to move to Bareilles and other things. On the tablet that Rudy was holding in the life-size portrait, you see of him sitting on a stump. The words from Bless Me Ultima: love, life, and if despair enters your heart, look for me in the evenings when the wind is gentle and the owls sing in the hills. I shall be with you. Rudy was a progressive voice for civil and human rights, a fierce advocate for education, the earth, water rights, and immigration. He warned of dictators who rule by fear, closing not only physical borders, but forums where ideas are debated. He asked that we become activists to preserve democracy. The year he passed, he wrote a note to Mayor Keller, and I am trying to find that one. Let's see. Perfect. That said, let's continue helping the least fortunate among us. And if you want more information, I recommend that you visit the Rudolfo Anaya digital archive. You can read his autobiography, you can hear people talking about him, you can see his manuscripts, and I just want to say, Viva Rudy. Leslie, can you pull up her book cover?
Oh, okay, then I
Well,
Sorry, no, I'm getting devastated.
Good afternoon. Do we need to stretch? Come on. Stand and stretch. Okay. Oh, yeah, that's the professor in me. My name is Irene Blea, Irene Isabel Blea. Blea is my father's name. My mother's last name was Mondragon. And I was born on the mountain, on the mountain, north of Las Vegas, north of Ocate, north of Ojo Feliz, around and on top of what is now White's Peak. So Rudy and I had nothing in common. But we really had a whole lot in common. He loved the expanse of the llano. I loved the expanse of the mountain. And we love New Mexico. I mean, love New Mexico. Not just like it, tolerate it. We do that. But we love it. We love it like we love our relatives. And by the way, two of my relatives are here today. My granddaughter, Draven, please stand, who's graduating from UNM. And my son-in-law, Danny, standing by the door. Thank you for being here. My friend Laura sitting in the back. Laura, we continue to pray for your son. And I want to start off by telling you that I take some notes when you speak. So I'm always writing. Rudy was a trickster, but we knew him as travieso. Okay? Travieso has to do with poking fun at, teasing, mocking, and he was that also. Yeah, he was a little bit of a flirt. But we both shared some things that had to do with writing, and that was the inspiration for a story. Rudy, Gordene, thank you for making this possible. Thank you, Leslie. Gordene, you shared how Ultima appeared to Rudy. Things like that happen to Chicanos all the time. So when you read about magical realism, we live it. We live it. It actually is real. Some people will say, oh, that's folklore, that's superstition. No, it's real. And the mountains are alive, and the llano is alive, and the rocks are alive, and the robins are alive, and it's going to be spring, and I am a happy camper. I had no intention of writing a book about Rudy. I knew him as a friend, I knew him as a colleague. I did not know him from the Chicano movement, and that point has been made clear. He was also 10, 11 years older than I. So we had that indifference. I am a radical Chicana feminista and proud of it. Viva la raza, viva la raza. And I am glad to tell you that I was at the forefront of the movement, and people who were critical of Rudy were a little louder than me. I didn't make too much noise about Rudy because I kind of thought the books were good. They were interesting. But we only had a few other books, Pocho, Y no se lo tragó la tierra. Those books were around. And so Rudy's was a welcome, his Bless Me Ultima was a welcome book. He never talked too much about the premio de Quinto Sol gave him. He said, I think they gave it to me because I was the only one that applied. But he was humble. I don't know who applied, but he was humble in the most gentle kind of way. I got to meet him in early 1980 when I was invited to come and tour the UNM campus. They were looking for a professor, but nobody told me. They just invited me to come tour the campus, so I did not have my academic hat on. I did not get my job there. I didn't work there until many years later. Actually, Rudy and I, we had a conversation during that time, and that's in the book. I won't tell you too much about the book right now, but I do want to tell you that we really met in Spain, where we went to present our work, and Pat kind of brought us together. So Pat was instrumental not only in Rudy's life, but also in my life in that she was the taming force in us. Because we get to talking, and Pat, when Pat stood up and walked away, she'd had enough, and we were on our own, so there was no moderator. When I wrote the book, it happened. I'll just tell you how it happened. I live in Quaker Heights, and in order to get out of my neighborhood to go to the senior center, I have to drive by Rudy's street. So, éramos vecinos, but we weren't close. We didn't live close together. We lived a few blocks away. Anyway, I drove by the turnoff to his house, and I had a funny feeling, heard a funny little noise. And I looked out the window, there was nothing there. I looked into the passenger seat, and there were tennis shoes on the floor. And Rudy was sitting there. And he said, Irene, take me by my house. He didn't even say hello. I said, Rudy, what are you doing here? And I said, no. And he said, what do you mean no? I said, Rudy, you scary me espantates. And he said, oh, I don't want to give you susto. I said, you're about to give me susto right now. Go away, something's wrong. I thought later that I had been dreaming, I had seen a ghost, I had made him up. But that's how the book came to be. One of my other books, Irene with Wolf Medicine, came that way, and you see my friend Laura going, yeah. I looked out the window one evening, and there in the middle of my yard was a wolf. I was writing a book, but I thought it was about surviving domestic violence. But my friend said, no, that's not your book. Your book is that you are a Chicana from the backside of the mountain who's traveled all over the world, got a PhD. That's your book. I didn't want to write that. But when I looked out there into the yard in the dark, the wolf said, write the book. I wrote 86 more pages because of that wolf and because of my friend Pat. The reason I wrote Rudy finally was what happened to me in the car. And I started to ramble through these memories of Rudy. And I started to jot them down in my journal, and I've been journaling since 1978. And I went back to read, at the end of the journal, I go back to read the notations to see how crazy I had been, or how right or how wrong I had been. And I realized I had a lot of memories, so I put them together in the book. I teach a writing workshop online for women who have not published books, and I had some of the women read my manuscript, and one of the comments came back, and it was the most powerful comment. And the comment was, Irene, in this manuscript, you've given us the opportunity to say goodbye to Rudy. Because Rudy died during all the commotion of illnesses and masks and what have you. The book contains a number of stories. Some of them have to do with a lot of them have to do with writing, the writing world, the world of writers, and publishing, and also how we write books from our perspective, for our people. But we're finding that some of those elements are universal, and in that universality of universal elements, we're all human. And the one thing that Rudy always told me was, Irene, it's all fiction. Finally, I got tired of listening to Rudy tell me it's all fiction. I said, okay, explain that to me. He said, we make it up. We have an experience, and we see it through our own cultural lens, and that lens reveals to us what we think is real, and what we think is true, and what we think is right. So we are here in this room making up stories, telling stories, sharing stories. I hope that you do share more stories about Rudy, and particularly for your project. And I would like to support that at some point. The book is also about death and dying. It's about Rudy and his personality and the many things a person from our Chicano background has to give up in order to become a success in mainstream America. It's a lonely, lonely ride. And I never understood that there was this little bit missing in Rudy, and I couldn't put my finger on it until I wrote the book, and it was that little bit of loneliness that's still left in us that says, okay, you're out of the realm of the norm, because that's not what people, by people I mean Chicanos, Hispanos, and mainstream cultures think of us. We don't fit comfortably. But we make our way, and we make our way well, and we make our way with creativity, with kindness, and a lot of projection toward the future. Death and dying had something to do not only with Rudy and the fact that he lost Pat, and he was very sad about that. And I had lost my mother, but never really mourned my mother's death. Because as a single parent, a mother of one, and a crazy teenager who is this lovely young lady's mother, who, by the way, quit the university in her early junior year to join a rock group that Roy opened up for Blue Oyster Cult. After I had paid full tuition fees and books. So those memories that came back because I was writing about Rudy and his life, and I didn't know Rudy and I were friends. And that's clear in the book, isn't it? Yes. Rudy and I were comrades, Rudy and I were faculty, Rudy and I were vecinos, éramos conocidos. But I didn't think we were friends until I wrote the book, because I had to go. I think I had lived my life washing this hand, keeping an eye on my daughter, writing and publishing for tenure, and I just didn't pay attention. I didn't pay attention. When my mother died, I was grief-stricken, but I had to come back. I had a daughter that was very ill at the time. She has a rare disease called Wilson's disease. And I was just overwhelmed. And so I didn't properly mourn my mother. And the book, and writing Rudy's book, writing about Rudy, gave me the opportunity to mourn my mother and take my time doing it. Because one thing Rudy kept telling me is, I want to help you, Irene. I'd say, Rudy, I don't need your help. I said, but I feel like I need to help you. I said, there's no need for you to help me. I'm okay. I was frazzled. I was working too hard. I was exhausted. And Rudy said, oh, I don't know. I feel I should help you, but I don't know how. I learned how after writing the book. He helped me mourn my mother. Isn't that amazing? That's amazing. The book is about love. Love, Rudy's love for Pat, our love for New Mexico. And it's also about friendships that you might have that you don't know about, or that you haven't cultivated, or that you rejected. I see two friends right there. So look around, look at the people around you, and see who is your friend. And not everybody that comes into your life is your friend. And love is not about sexuality and all the other things that you see in movies. Love is about hard work. You have to work at it. Rudy and I were competitive. One day Rudy says, damn it, Irene, every time I turn around, there you are. I said, Rudy, we're walking the same kind of journey. And he said, yeah, I guess so. That's when we started talking about los tiempos pasados, the times that made us, the time we grew up in, what was happening in this country, why the Chicano movement, why Rudy was not as active as many people thought he should be at the beginning of the movement. Well, he was a man with a wife. He told me, I had a mortgage. I had to pay the mortgage. So he did that, and he did that honorably. And after talking with his niece, she says, you know what? He loved his house. I love my house. Oh, it's a little bit grungy, but it's my house. That's where my family lives. That's where I live. That's where the books get written. That's where we cook. And my daughter makes us experiments with food. And we're the testers. And so we have a good time in that house. And I understand why he loved his house. He worked hard for his house. It overlooks Albuquerque, looks down on the river, you see the montaña. Yes?
I want to move on to our next speaker.
Oh, okay.
If you could wrap it up.
Sure.
Because we've gone way over, and we also have, you're coming back.
I'm coming
in
back. I'm coming
a short
back.
time. She's going to come back Saturday, May 3rd, to do a reading on Rudolfo
And talk
Anaya.
more about the book.
So I just
But
want to
he
let our
thank
last
you.
speaker get up.
Thank you. So he loved the sunset. I love the sunset too. And in the book, you'll see how we're very much the same, but didn't know it all the time, especially me, I didn't know. Estaba tapada. I mean, what can I tell you? I was working hard and I was working long. I think in closing, what I do want to tell you is your story is important. Your story is important. It's important to you, but it's important to the people who care about you. And it's important to this community, and it's important to this nation. This nation consists of highly complex individuals and people and groups. And we need your story now. We need it so that we can become in touch with the universality of being human. I wanted to humanize Rudy because people knew him as the author, as the professor. I knew him, I came to know him as a friend, but I knew him as my vecino. And therein is what we all are. To some degree or another, we are all neighbors. By the way, I do want to ask, are there any relatives of Rudy and Anaya in the room? Sometimes there are, and I. Pardon?
Distant.
Distant? Thank you. What is your name?
Euphemia.
Euphemia, beautiful name. And that's the beauty of New Mexico. We have people named Florencio, Patricio, Plácido, Euphemia, and Eugenia. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here.
Better. Hi everyone, my name is Mike Dubois, and I had a different kind of relationship with Rudy. I was Rudy's financial advisor. In 2005, Rudy called the big bank that I was working at and said he wanted to have an advisor who was a native New Mexican. Well, in my business, everybody's from New York or California. There's nobody from New Mexico, so I was selected by default because I was the only native New Mexican in the office. So a few days later, Rudy and Pat came to the office, and the first thing I noticed was how deeply in love the two of them were. I had never seen love between two people as I saw between those two people. And I was just in awe. Not the fact that it was Rudy and Anaya, but the fact that it was the love that they felt for each other. So they would come in the office from time to time, and then Pat passed away. And Rudy kind of went inside himself when that happened, and he didn't come in the office. He said, when we meet, you have to come to the house. I said, okay. So the first time I went to his house, I said, Rudy, I've got to pick up my youngest daughter, who at the time was 10. I said, I've got to pick her up from school, so she'll be with me. He said, okay. So I brought her in. Rudy and I didn't have a meeting. He spent the entire time talking to my daughter. And he was just, Olivia, you have to. And of course he brought out books and he autographed books for her and gave them to her. And he said, Olivia, you have to read these. And then the next time I talked to Rudy, he said, we'll have a meeting. He said, well, you have to bring Olivia. So every time I met with him at his house, I had to bring my daughter, Olivia, to see him. His love for children was amazing. Just how he just immediately empathized and knew what she was thinking. And so their relationship was far greater than any relationship that I had with him, which was very different. That's really all I really wanted to say. I just wanted to let you know how much, he was probably the kindest man that I ever knew. There was not a single mean bone in his body. He was so kind. And he was an absolute treasure that the state has produced. Probably the greatest living New Mexican, the greatest New Mexican of all time.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for all of you, for everything that you shared and all the work you put into it. We can open up for 15 minutes or so, just if you have questions for our panelists. And after that, we'll have some cake and do some just visiting. So, I don't know, Gordene, you want to take charge of the questions? Or
Do we have any folks have any questions?
I think you should promote the Village of Los Ranchos, the Friends of Los Ranchos, and the Historical Society. Some kind of a plug that people may not know about.
Oh, right. Okay.
Why not?
Join me. Yes, if you're interested in more information about the Los Ranchos Historical Society, and we don't bombard you with things, we only send out an email to let you know when we're having a talk, where it is, and then we might send out a reminder the night before, or in this case, the morning before. And that was late. There's a sign-up sheet on the back, and I'd love it if you all would sign up. Basically, the Los Ranchos Historical Society, I had an idea that we needed a historical society to preserve and protect. What I didn't know is our former mayor, Joe Craig, had already been doing that work. And he knew everything about the history in Los Ranchos, and he knew everyone. And Joe and I got together, and then we pulled in Eugenia Eberly and Ron Chavez, and we elected Theresa as our first president of the Los Ranchos Historical Society. But we do different talks. Theresa has organized amazing field trips for everyone. And if you'd like to learn more or join us on something, we'd love it. Friends of Los Ranchos is an organization that Joe Craig founded to keep Los Ranchos semi-rural, and he contributed money to the village, and he found lots of open space for the village. And actually Joe's wife is right here, and we're lucky to have Pam Craig join us, who also has been very interested in history. So please sign up on our sign-up sheet. And again, thank you for coming.
Do any of these ladies want to say, does anybody else?
Oh, yeah. Why don't you go ahead and do that? Yeah. Okay, sorry. What did you want me to say?
I didn't know if anybody wanted, does anybody want to make a comment?
Comment, questions, a Rudy story? Yeah, Marcia.
I have two things. One, my question is, did they have children?
It was the saddest thing Rudy said in his life. Pat was she 14 years older than Rudy? She was 14 years older than Rudy, and they tried to have children, and she had 2 miscarriages. And if you read the novel Albuquerque, you find that the character of Rudy, who is called Ben Chavez in the novel, finds out that he has a son with a woman artist who has died. And so there was a longing to have children, and hence the story that Mike said. And also his children's literature is to try to educate children in No More Bullies. It's written half side in English, the other side in Spanish, but encouraging people. He said, other countries do it. Why can't we speak more than one language?
His wife had 2 daughters.
Yes.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
His wife did, do you want to say something that did have 2 daughters?
Rudy, Pat had 2 daughters. One of them was pretty much grown, and in fact got married a little after they got together. But Rudy also helped raise those girls. And he was very much a part of their life. And Rudy comes from a very large family with a whole bunch of children. I was fortunate to go to one of their 4th of July picnics and saw him interact with children for the first time.
Yes.
With the initiatives to get rid of his books or squash their use or proliferation, were they because they were being used by the movement, or were they just bubbling up?
People, he said, usually that try to censor books don't really read the books. They read a few lines in the books and they saw, oh, there were witches in the books. So they thought, oh, the book is filled with witchcraft. And as he said, people have misperceptions, but the people that had read him and understood the books were indignant and very upset that was happening.
So it wasn't so much about squashing the Chicano movement.
Well, he said it did basically be aimed at one people. So that's also a part of it. And certainly in the case 2012 in Arizona, it was an attempt, particularly because people were worried about immigrants, and they took down the long-standing Mexican-American program that had been at the college. I mean, we see these things happening right now. He was a visionary. He knew, what would be happening in the future, I think.
May I add something?
Please.
The Chicano movement was highly threatening to mainstream America because it was highly critical, and that criticism was rooted in the history that mainstream America wrote itself. So basically what we did was we took what was written, researched it further, and made it public. So we were telling stories that some people just did not want told. But in Bless Mi Ultima, there's a time when Antonio is curious about the brothel that his brothers frequent. So he goes and peeks in, and he sees scantily dressed women. But there's no sexual acts or any eroticism taking place in the book, but people found that an opportunity for criticism. So I think it was twofold. The fact that the switch from English to Spanish was just, people just didn't like it, and because they thought we were talking about them. And in fact, we were. We had to, otherwise we would have had a totally skewed vision of Mexican Americans in this country.
I'd like to make a comment that I'm a friend of Dennis. My roots come from back in the mountains, as hers. I've read Rudolfo's books. As a young child, my parents moved to Los Angeles. I was raised right here in Los Angeles, I went to Valley High School. Every book that he wrote I could relate to. Some of the language that he used, some words, Hispanic words, English words, and I've had a wonderful afternoon here listening to all of you guys, and I can relate to everything everyone has spoken about. And I thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Any other questions or? Yes.
I had a comment. I was a student in the 1980s at the University of Colorado in Boulder, and I was the president of the Migrant Action Program. We brought Rudolfo and Anaya to our school. I'm so sad because I didn't know he had passed away, but he was a light. He was, we could organize, and yeah, he was a threat because we had Oyate, we had BSA, the Black Student Alliance, we had Mexican American program, and he just encouraged us to go to college. It was a university where we were not welcome in the ivory towers of CU Boulder campus, and we got there and we opened the doors and we made sure to keep them open to bring like cousins, relatives, anybody we could to go to the university. And I would just be honored to say, que viva la raza, que viva Chicana, que viva. And you know what was so amazing about him? He used English and Spanish for inclusion. Absolutely. He wanted people to understand us, that we were hardworking people, and we just wanted to be welcomed here in our own land, in our own homelands. And Chicano was just such an amazing word because I haven't heard it in so long. And then we went to mestizos. We're half Mexican, we're half native. These are our homelands. And he was a lighthouse for me. And
His adios.
yes, gracias por todo.
Thank you very much. And he wanted that to happen to little kids in terms of education. He said, you need role models for them. You need to have their culture. You need to have their history, and you do not need to punish them for knowing Spanish. And he tried. Anyone else? I really appreciated your comment.
Oh, thank
Huge thank you.
I just got lucky being here.
We're lucky you were here. Are we ready for cake, or does anyone have? Okay, let's have cake. Talk about Rudy. Please sign up on our sign-up sheet and share your story on the board with Rudy too, about Rudy. Or